When the devil is right. Asmodeus of Pathfinder lore is the most interesting evil god in all of fiction because he's in the right. So let me tell you his tale, as was told to me. In the beginning was a seal, origins mysterious. From this came two motes, known to us as the first. Then came lesser motes, whom the first consumed. But more and more lesser motes came, until the first could not consume them all. In the aeons of time, the first became more, as did the lesser, who could not be consumed. Together they became the first 8 gods. One of the first then spoke the first words, naming himself Aiz and his brother Asmodeus. Asmodeus, who would become the first devil, forged the contract of creation with the other gods, and together they created many things. In time, mortals were created, and Asmodeus looked upon them and said, they were good tools. And Aiz agreed, but believed they could be more. Aiz blessed the mortals with free will. Angered, Asmodeus confronted Aiz, showing the chaos and destruction free will caused. At this, Aiz knew regret for the first time. Aiz withdrew in sorrow for his actions. But then Sarenrae, a lesser god of Aiz's own creation, came to him and extolled the virtues of mortal free will, and showed the other gods sided with him in this. His heart hardened by Sarenrae, Aiz stood firm in favor of mortal free will, and against Asmodeus. Asmodeus gathered the gods of law and evil, and Aiz found gods of good and chaos standing with him. Asmodeus declared war upon Aiz to restore the order that was lost. The first war to ever be known, the gods fought fiercely across the plains and upon worlds of plenty, but none were able to defeat the others. Asmodeus then stretched out his hand in a gesture of peace towards Aiz. Aiz had a desperate longing for peace, and joyfully and naively moved to accept. At that weakness, Asmodeus fulfilled his plan, killing his brother in the first act of betrayal. You may think Asmodeus was a betrayer and a warmonger from this tale. And you would likely be right, but let me explain to you why he is still in the right. Take this analogy. You invite your friends to make an axe together. You do the vast majority of the work, and after all the work is done, one of your friends, without permission, adds legs and a bird's brain to the axe. Now it runs about, chaotically chopping things. If you were to demand that the axe be returned to its original state, you would be in the right. This is the situation Asmodeus found himself at the start of the first war between the gods. The demands of Asmodeus were justified. The conflict could have been avoided if Aiz had conceded. The worst conflicts of the gods, which devastated mortal souls, could have been avoided if Aiz would have thought to make new beings instead. He could have even asked Asmodeus to help him. They were brothers. But alas, Aiz's chaotic nature caused him to use what was in front of him, with no thought for the rules of social cohesion. This leaves us mortals with severe implications, for we are the axe in the analogy. Asmodeus has every right to demand we be the tools we were made to be. It is the graciousness of Asmodeus to allow us our wills, only correcting our misbehavior with the threat of hell. Asmodeus may use or dispose of us as he pleases, but he chooses to deal in contracts and bargains. Mortals with a strong sense of justice may choose to serve Asmodeus as the rightful lord, perhaps even seeing the sacrifices as merely delivering what is already owed. But there can be no mistake, Asmodeus is evil, perhaps the most evil being in the universe. He may respect the rights of gods and respects the deals made with mortals, but he desires the exploitation of the weak and foolish. Honesty is a tool of his, but he remains deceptive and will enslave even an honorable man or god for his own machinations. Worse, he seeks out the suffering of mortals as a moral good. Pharasma guides many evil souls to his domain, and his devils are sent to trick all sorts of mortals into infernal bargains. For most of these souls, the first course of action is a great age of torture. Only afterward are they made useful to hell, and even then, many, perhaps most, are simply destroyed. I believe their souls are too broken to even be used. But by law, we are his to dispose of, and one day, all mortals will be under his control. I enjoy this exercise for more than just the novelty. As a person who takes rights very seriously, the notion that the greatest evil could perfectly respect your rights is important to keep in mind, especially to keep myself in check. Evil may be lawful. Looking into it for this video, there are several problems with this narrative in Pathfinder lore. For one, the origin tale is based on the teachings of Asmodeus' followers, who have an agenda, but then this is still useful to see propaganda of the cult, and maybe the true ideology for many cultists. Next, Aiz probably contributed a roughly equal share as Asmodeus. This may mean Asmodeus doesn't have a controlling share over our souls, but Asmodeus slew Aiz at the end of the war, and I propose that Asmodeus was Aiz's heir. They were brothers. The two did fight, but I get the impression Aiz loved him to the end, and that love was not misplaced. Asmodeus did not take away our free wills at the end of the war. Or perhaps Asmodeus gained some share because he forged a contract of creation. Lastly, Asmodeus may have violated Aiz's rights before killing him by making a gesture of peace. It is unclear if this is a peace treaty, an offer, a lie, or a deception of war. I believe it is the last. Asmodeus stretched out his hand, implying an offer of peace, but never stating it, and Aiz was foolishly deceived by his own hopes. Without a contract beforehand stating the rules of war, these sorts of deceptions are no violations of rights, and at least when the war is a deceptive one, such as this one, as it was Aiz who was the first violator. In a defense of war, many unsavory acts are acceptable under self-defense. There is one more thing. Aiz may not be chaotic. His actions to me do not line up this way, but the first 8 gods theoretically correspond to alignment, which theoretically makes Aiz lawful good. This doesn't change the narrative, but makes his actions less understandable, unless he was protecting spontaneously developed mortal free will, as is implied on other tales, instead of creating mortal free will himself. This would really diminish the lore of Pathfinder. It would degrade Asmodeus, who is a very active force in the world, by moving him in the direction of being just another hypocritical evil god. I encourage everyone to rule Aiz as chaotic good.